or writing proposals for corporates or for foundations. If you sit on the Monroe Park campus, Susanna Stora's name may be a bit more familiar to you. She handles proposals coming from Monroe Park, includes engineering, business, humanities and science, education. And I cover the MCV campus, so I'm particularly working on health projects. The whole reason we exist as a CFR office is because there's two ways of bringing funding into the university. The first, which many of you are familiar with, is sponsored research or sponsored programs. You find a sponsor, a donor, you work with sponsored programs, the funding, hopefully, comes into VCU, and then it gets distributed to your particular department. But CFR exists because there's also a certain type of donor that doesn't want to give to the university. They want to give specifically to a 501c3 nonprofit. And VCU has a number of these. It's a philanthropic way to bring funds into the university. In this case, you'll still have a donor that you're applying to, but instead of working with sponsored programs, you'll work with our office. We do work with sponsored programs. We're in touch with them quite a bit. These are not blocked off ways of working. We then channel the funds through a VCU foundation, so they're being received by the 501c3, and then they get distributed to your department. So in the end, as a faculty member, you still get to spend the money. Just different ways and different legal ways, really, of bringing funds into the university. There's a lot behind these two streams as to what goes into each category and why a certain donor would fit better with sponsored programs versus CFR. And that's really our role, to talk through that process with you and to chat with sponsored programs. So don't worry about that too much for right now, but just know that both channels exist within the university. So who the heck are we getting money from? Who are the typical donors that are donating to VCU? You can kind of think of this chart as a Venn diagram. So on the far left, we have foundations. These are organizations that might have originally been a family, could have been a family with quite a lot of money, or it could be a foundation that was set up with a variety of funding sources. And these are common names that you might have heard before. I sometimes refer to them as the NPR foundations because they're always listing their donors. But you might have heard of Mellon, Keck. A specific Virginia donor is the Jeffress Trust. And then many people are familiar on the local level with the Community Foundation for Greater Richmond. Those are all typical foundations. In the middle, we have corporate foundations. They are philanthropic entities, but they're funded by corporate funds. So there'll usually be a massive donation coming in from the corporate entity every year. We have recent relationships with the McKesson Foundation, Elevance Health, that's Anthem. And you must know the names Capital One and Dominion Energy, very familiar Richmond names in some cases. And finally, we work with entities that are solely corporate, and places like Genentech, Genworth, local names like Town Bank and Allianz. These corporates have a variety of ways that they can give out funds, but in the end, their aims are usually charitable. So the Corporate and Foundation Relation Office manages these. I want to talk a little bit about some trends that we've been seeing in philanthropic giving. And these could impact the way you think about the work that you want to have funded, and how we need to prepare to talk to a donor or to prepare a proposal. The first is reach versus impact. I think many years ago, although there are still some groups that do this, many just wanted to give out numbers. They wanted to know that you reached a certain amount of school children with your program, or that you gave out enough backpacks or school supplies. It was simply the quantity that mattered. And we see donors now really digging into impact. They want to understand not just did you give out the backpacks, but did it change learning outcomes? How are you going to measure those learning outcomes? How do we know if the teachers were impacted, or the students, or the particular community that you're working with? And so reach is no longer enough. It's still important, but they also really want to look at the deeper impact or long-term impact of an investment made by a donor. Two is sustainability. Donors are often very nervous that if they give funding out, year two, the project might end. Who's going to fund it in year two, year three, year four? Is the university going to contribute some money along the way? Are you going to hire staff that in year two have to be let go because there's no more money? So talking about a sustainability plan beyond, we'll just fundraise for it, is really important to understand within the university how the project is supported and how we might find multiple outside sources of support. And obviously, the whole reason we're here today, a lot of donors are looking for genuine community engagement. a lot of the work that some donors still are okay with this, but over the years, originally, I would say there was this idea of community informed. All the research could be done at VCU, and you would just tell the affected population at the end what you found, or you'd write a paper, or maybe you'd post it on a website. We're seeing more and more donors asking, well, how was the community involved in the design of the research? Who did you talk to inform your methodology for this particular study or project that you wanted to do? And then we're seeing some donors even further down saying, how is the community in a position of power in this project or this research that you want to do? How are they leading? And that often leads to the question that I have there on screen, is VCU the best organization to carry out the work? Should VCU be the lead, or should your community partner maybe be the lead? And VCU can support with a few more as a sub-grantee level. So donors are really trying to reach particular populations a lot of the time, or like in number one, have a deeper impact. And just because you have a PhD or just because VCU is a well-known university in the region doesn't mean we're always the best one to carry it out. So they really want the PI and all the partners to have thought through this process. Where should the money sit? How is decision-making power being distributed or held? And I'll give you a few examples of that. I realize that's a very wide-ranging piece to box to have to check. Okay. And the last one, trends in philanthropic giving. At VCU, we are increasingly coordinating donor outreach. I would say 10 years ago, before I even joined the team, there was a lot of ability for faculty to reach out to corporate contacts. There were multiple units going to the same corporate contacts. There were people applying for philanthropic funds without anyone on the philanthropy team knowing. And so that has been corralled quite a bit at VCU. There are more policies guiding the way we can reach out to donors. But I want to let everyone here on the call know two things. Number one, our goal is to make it easy for the donor to give us funds and easy for you to comply with donor requirements. So they have their own and we have our own, and both have to be worked with. If a faculty were to go and reach out to a donor on their own, or even submit a formal application on their own, there's a lot of checks and balances that may not have occurred. And it can cause a headache for you, a delay for the funds that you want to receive and that the donor may want to give. But we have legal, financial, and compliance pieces that have to be met. And so contacting our office earlier, having proactive conversations helps everyone so that you're not going to the trouble of submitting a proposal that we can't actually accept. Number two, alerting us early and often that you're interested in pursuing a proposal decreases internal competition. In the last year alone, we have had multiple situations where a faculty has gone to a particular donor and made a request for funds unbeknownst to my team. And meanwhile, we have been working with that particular donor for multiple years to solicit a multi-million-dollar request. Or some are smaller, even the hundreds of thousands. And that poor faculty had no idea. They just went ahead and did this, and there was no chance of it being funded because the donor had a prior relationship with us. There's a history, there's an ongoing conversation. So talking to our team in advance really ensures that you have a full scope of what's going on at the university. You have a full history of the relationship. We can give you guidance on the best way to apply. And I think overall, it saves our faculty a lot of time and energy. And it makes that recipient process, hopefully when you do win a grant, makes receiving those funds a heck of a lot easier because we've checked off what the donor needs and what VC needs along the way. All right, so I'm going to back up for a sec. Let's talk a little bit about what these community engaged projects could look like. As I mentioned, we have some that we would say the community is engaged in. We had some where the community is informed, some where the community is involved to a greater extent, some where it's more community led. This is a huge spectrum depending on your particular project, your particular interests, and the requirements of the donor. So it can vary quite a bit. So we're going to take a look at a little bit of that spectrum based on projects that have been funded here at VCU. So Genworth is a corporate, I think we got this from the corporate side. I don't think there was a corporate foundation. And they have a very generic oh, the Genworth Foundation. Okay, it's my own slide. I should know. They have a very generic statement on their website. The foundation is dedicated to investing in organizations that are helping to strengthen the communities where we live and work. I have seen this language quite a few times. um, and this is very typical for a corporate. They don't want to just give anywhere. They want to give in the communities where their brand is better known and where their staff already work. So Genworth the Genworth gift was about $100,000 for 1 year of funding. And this resulted from a very personal relationship between Genworth representatives and Katie Ferguson and some of the other corporate relations team members. And there were ongoing conversations about what was going on at VCU and the particular populations that they want to reach. So they are a benefits, I think, insurance provider, and they really wanted to reach an older demographic. And so we were talking to them about projects at VCU that reach older individuals in the community. Nursing's mobile health and wellness was a big one, and we talked to them a lot about how that program had grown over the years and how that reaches senior populations. And we also talked about students in gerontology who were doing administrator in training internships. They're actually going to be administrators in nursing or supportive care environments in the future, and how critical those jobs are with an aging population in the state of Virginia and across the country, to be honest. So Genworth loved this, and they said, fantastic, we want to split the funds between mobile health and wellness and gerontology. They have since funded this for a second year, which has been wonderful. But we also gave them an opportunity to interact with the larger VCU community. So they've been a big supporter of athletics, and separate from their philanthropic contribution, have done some advertising through the Siegel Center at basketball games. We actually have a game this Saturday, which is like the kind of the Genworth sponsored game. And they do a healthy living fair for older adults before the game. So this has been a wonderful way for Genworth to feel like it's connected to a younger population, as well as the ways that VCU is serving an older population. And there's a great deal of trust there between the School of Nursing and gerontology and Genworth, because Genworth knows that these experts are reaching really vulnerable populations. And they trust that VCU kind of knows how to do that and has built really strong relationships and partnerships in the community and wants to continue to support that. So this is a particularly dynamic one, but it's been really exciting to see the Genworth employees especially get excited about where their company is giving money, and then it also gives them ways to interact with the university. Poly Family Foundation. So many of you may know the Poly Heart Center at VCU, VCU Health. They actually fund more than just health causes. They have been entrenched in education and human services as well. One of the projects that they've funded is the Richmond Teacher Residency. And this is out of the School of Education. Its budget is way more than $50,000 a year, but that's what the Poly Family Foundation contributed for 1 year of funding. And RTR helps train teachers and then place them in Richmond, Henrico, and Chesterfield schools with a really supportive first few years of teaching, so that it encourages teachers to stay in the counties where they have been placed, and gives them a ton of support just as new teachers to make sure that they have the resources they need and the voices of experienced teachers coming in. They particularly go into high need schools in the Metro Richmond area. So the Poly Family Foundation, in this sense, wanted to support not just an education initiative, but one that was happening out in the community. And again, they used VCU education experts as a trusted resource to say, you have been partnering with the community for many years. You have the relationships with the public schools and the administrators and the other community support organizations. And so we're going to channel the funding through you, understanding that it's going to these teachers, but it's having a much greater impact outside of VCU. It's really about what's happening in these schools and the impact that that can make on the school environment and the students. And finally, we have the Jeffress Trust. Jeffress looks at advancing health equity, particularly in the state of Virginia. They will not fund organizations outside. So this is a great one. VCU has had wonderful success with these awards. And there's two levels. The first one they fund for a year or two, which is a partnership award. And then if that goes well, you're open for a much larger grant of $600,000 for a research award. We have more people moving through the first one now to get to the second because we've had successful applications. So this has been great to see. But this is an example of a donor who says, we don't want just for the community to be involved, but we really need to understand how the community is leading these projects. And they have a preference, if we apply as VCU, that half of the budget at least goes to a community partner. Seen to be a little bit less and be successful, but in general, you're giving a huge chunk of the funds that you win in the grant to a subgrantee. So one project that we had that was successful last year was addressing health literacy in the epilepsy community. This was Dr. Sandra Dewar in the Department of Neurology. And she really wanted to understand the key root issues as to why medical adherence was tough for a lot of epilepsy patients. And so she developed community advocacy groups and advisory groups to hear from epilepsy patients and caregivers in designing social media messages that would go out to the epilepsy community. So the community impacted by the work had a huge role in developing the content, and that was really exciting to the Jeffers Trust. Another one that has moved on into the research phase, 3 years of funding, 300, I think it's supposed to be 600,000. Dr. Tosas in Massey Cancer Center developed the Chickahominy Truth Project in collaboration with the Chickahominy. And now moving on to the research phase, they are partnered with, I believe, a dozen tribes in Central and Eastern Virginia to look at individual level contributors to cancer risk. So this has been a really, I mean, as the name implies, a huge trust building activity between the tribes and the Massey Cancer Center, and has really been led by the community in many ways. If this is not Massey saying this is how you have to do it, but Massey providing its expertise in particular areas and the tribe leading in many other ways. There's wonderful media about the Truth Project out there. So if you just Google it really quickly, just fantastic stories and pictures and evidence coming out of this group. So I realized that was a bit of a whirlwind. I'm happy to talk about these projects in more detail afterwards if you have particular questions. But just trying to show you the different ways, that we know VCU is already engaging with the community, but then also how donors are interested in what's already going on and how they also may push for certain types of projects to take on greater community involvement. So what does this mean for you and your particular research interest or the work that you're doing with different community members? Whether you have a community engagement aspect to your proposal or your research looks very different, these are the basic topics and questions that need to be understood before you're probably ready to go talk to a donor or apply for an RFP. These are pieces that we ask faculty to come and bring when they meet with us, because I mean, we're going to ask about them. They're the basic topics that any donor is going to ask. So if we can't, we need to be able to talk about it internally so that you're then ready to write a proposal. And it shouldn't come as a shock, a description of the need, why you want to do the project in the first place and what you hope to accomplish, what those outcomes look like, who you're going to work with, timeline, budget, really key pieces. But I will emphasize the one at the bottom. The project does need to be a department priority or has the approval of a chair. Some person in leadership needs to have heard of this project in your department. If this is super secret or it's a side project of yours, we sadly do not have the staff to cover every project that needs funding. So we do need to know that someone in your department has approved of this and wants this to go forward. So you have a project idea, you've heard of all these donors out there, you know that one probably matches with your work. How do you start to think about matching with a donor or finding a donor? I would encourage you to see your project from the donor perspective. One of the ones I just mentioned under the Jeffers Trust with Dr. Sandra Dewar dealt with epilepsy. Sure, there are epilepsy donors out there who are specifically interested in that medical issue. However, if Dr. Dewar just looked at epilepsy donors, she would never have found the Jeffers Trust. By looking at dynamic aspects of your project, you can often see your work from a donor's perspective. So for example, is your health project also potentially an education project? Is your education project also potentially a health project? Does it deal with health equity? Are there certain populations involved? Is it the state of Virginia that your research is going to reach? Is it a particular population in Richmond? We have donors who are interested in certain geographic areas. Are you going to do research? Is your research going to inform policy change? Donors are often interested in these bigger themes, and a lot of different types of projects can fit under them. So I'd encourage you, or in your work with our team, we can start to think about diverse ways of funding your particular project. Um, Similarly, there is a lot of information out on the web about different donors. So there are websites, I mean, even a Google search, 990s are the tax forms that foundations have to fill out. You can often find a lot of information about their particular areas of giving and what they're interested in, or past projects that they funded, simply by visiting a donor's website. So if you hear a name, Google it. Just, yeah, see what they have chosen to share publicly, and you can often figure out pretty quickly if they're a match or not. But beyond that, that's our job. We're trying to find you the right match, or to help you determine if someone you've heard of or found is a good match for your work. So don't feel like that's all on you, but a certain amount can be done. We don't have any secret resources that we get to use that aren't generally available to the public. So here's a few more examples of places you could start to look if you were interested. You'll be getting these slides, so don't feel like you have to copy these down. Candid actually just merged with Foundation Directory. So those are one and the same now. But Candid is an online database, and they have pulled information from years of tax forms and made it a much more digestible way of taking in information. We can give you a temporary access to that database should you want to do some research. The other one I will highlight is Pivot. Pivot is a multi-university resource that VCU subscribes to, and you can use keywords and filters to look for donors and also send yourself alerts when new donors become available. Cool thing about Pivot is that it finds opportunities that would fall into sponsored research and on the philanthropic CFR team side. So you could often find quite a few different donors that might be interested in your. And finally, just always please stay in touch with the CFR office. If you hear of a donor, shoot me an email. Be happy to chat. Would love to learn more about your work and what you want to do in the community and how we can help find a donor to make that happen for you. But it is a longer process. We need to talk. We need to understand your priorities. And sadly, the donors aren't always queuing up. Sometimes their deadlines are 6 months out. So talk to us earlier rather than later. We would love to learn more about your work and start to help you understand what a timeline to funding looks like. That is all for today. Thank you so much. I would love to take questions. I'm sure I've whipped through all of this quite too fast. So please let me know what else I can talk about.
Thank you, Franny, and thank you for engaging us in a robust conversation about community engaged scholarship and funding for community engaged scholarship. We have quite a few of you here, so we would love to have Franny take questions. You can either drop them in the chat or raise your hand, and a DCE team member can field the questions with us. And yeah, I see Jasmine. So Jasmine, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm driving, so I did have a question about just making an appointment with you all. I am at the BC Police Department, and we do a lot of community engagement. Specifically, have one that I've just sent a proposal up for. So I would like to kind of discuss that with your team, and also, I guess anything that's been provided, would that also be shared in an email later on?
Yes, to set up an appointment with us, the best way is to email that DAR CFR at VCU email that is in the presentation. It's available online if you were to just Google CFR at VCU as well. And we can direct you to the best person on our team to support your project.
Awesome. Other questions? No questions? Okay, well, I have one. Can you talk to us a little bit about how, specifically like the Jeffers Trust, when we're thinking about community engaged research and their desire for community-led research, and I know you said it's a two-pronged system where you first have to have one portion completed before you get the $600,000 of funding. Can you talk a little bit about how long that process takes and what they're looking for when you have things already established, as far as like partnership established versus do you have time to build that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that I'm happy to talk about Jeffers Trust, but I will emphasize it's a little bit unique in its emphasis on partnerships. So keep that in mind as I talk about this. So the Jeffers Trust usually you could look in probably in November each year. We send out an email and we try to get it to all the research administrators to tell their teams. But we offer a December info session for Jeffers because they don't release the RFP till January, and we find that's already too late. But knowing that we have years of experience with this donor, we try to do that before the winter break. So you get an orientation to what the heck this donor is, what they're interested in, and successful projects. We do a pretty deep dive on them. So that means when January rolls around, we have a list of proposals of professors who want to go, or staff who really have a project idea. It's well formed and we're ready to start working. Those are happening right now. And then the deadline is usually in February. This year, it's end of February. You will then hear from Jeffress by June 30th, and they expect a July, August, September start to your work. So that's kind of the timeline where it's almost a full year from when you would first hear from our team to when you're funded and active. So as I mentioned, there's two levels. The first level with Jeffress is the $150,000 of funding. And I think I have a slide on this, but just so I'm not misquoting. Okay, so it's 150,000. It's a partnership award. You can take a year or up to 2 years. It's the timeline's kind of your choice. They want you to develop relationships, build a foundation for future research, form partnerships, and really informing future research is really what it's about. So you have to have a particular topic. It has to address a root cause of health inequity, and you're exploring it. And I kind of think this is a trifecta. You can have your VCU office, you have a partner who's usually another nonprofit, a community organization, and then you have to have some sort of representation from the population that is being affected by the project and eventually by your research. So I have one right now looking at dental usage in dental Medicaid usage in elderly people in the state of Virginia. And so my question immediately to them right away when they said they want to do this project, I said, how are you going to get people over 65 involved? Like, they're retired most of the time. How are they contributing? And so Jeffress really emphasizes kind of those three pieces: who's in the community, who is working there every day, and then who is maybe they're one and the same, but who's being affected by your research and how are they involved from the start? Yes, they emphasize the partnership and the building. So you may already know of these organizations. You may have attended conference with them. Maybe you already have grant funding with one of the community organizations as well. That's okay. But this partnership award is not about diving right into research. They really want to make sure that the community connections are strong. Again, the connections to the population are strong. You can do focus groups. You can kind of dig around and learn a lot more about the root cause of the issue, or to help to determine the root cause that you think is causing an issue. But you're not doing research to like test a solution or you're not publishing, you're not collecting a lot of data at that point. Then you can move on to the research award, and that's when a lot more of those type of activities happen. Usually you keep the same partners and you also add some more to kind of grow the work. I think the Truth Project is a great example of that. They started working with the Chickahominy, and now it's become a much larger regional partnership. Jeffress has a table. I can share this. All right, so Jeffress has this table of moving from left to right, increasing level of public impact, but also increasing level of participation. So as I said, there are projects still out there that just inform. All the research is done, very closed off. And then, by the way, we learned this about your community. We learned this about your population. You weren't involved, but here's the information. And then it moves through consult, involve, collaborate. and empower. I even think that Jeffress, this is just one example of someone's chart that they made up. There's a lot of people who would say this arrow should go far beyond empower, because empower implies that VCU as the lead organization in an application is giving out power to community organizations, which is really not how it works or how it should work. So I don't want to suggest that this particular chart is the be all end all, but it does successfully show a bit of a spectrum in the different ways that a community can be involved in the proposal. Happy to share this as well if this is helpful for people, but I think this sort of spectrum is available in a lot of places online. There's a lot of groups talking about this, so I don't think it's brand new to most people on this call. This is just the way Jeffress looks at it in particular.
Awesome. Thank you. There's a question in the chat. It says, can you talk more about how we can get access to Candid/Foundation directory online and Pivot?
Sure, absolutely. So Candid/Foundation directory, because they're merging, our office pays an annual fee for a number of access points to that database. So we can give you a temporary login and we'll give you 2 or 3 weeks to do research. Usually people who are really interested after these calls really want to get going and do some, but you don't need a login for a whole year. You're not going to be using it every week. So we'll give you a short-term login and you can go around and poke around in the system and see how that works. It's pretty user-friendly. To access that, you'll email DAR CFR, that same generic email that will reach our team. That will let us know about why you're interested and a tiny bit about your research or your areas of interest. And then we can also give you a temporary login. Pivot, you might just have to Google VCU Pivot. I've had mine set up for ages. I don't actually know. It might be through sponsored research. They might be the ones who kind of own it or manage it. But it's a database. VCU subscribes. It should be free access, but I do think you have to, there's someone you have to contact to like kind of get in. But then afterwards, once you're linked in, your VCU email address and credentials should get you in. So that's a pretty easy setup.
It looks like
so I don't have a link for that one, but just here, give it a Google.
It looks like Rachel actually dropped a link, so thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Dialing back just for a sec, John Jones asked if there's a citation for the graphic that you just showed.
Oh yeah. Just give me one sec.
And we can also send that out if that's okay with you.
Okay. Drop this in the chat. So it's on page 5. So these are the Jeffress guidelines. It's like it's their whole RFP packet basically, but on page 5 is where that particular graphic came from.
Thank you. Other questions, thoughts?
I have one, Shalyn.
Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, Franny, would it be possible for you to almost outline the process on how we work with you? Like, so we reach out and then what happens? Like, what's your role? What's our role? How is that determined and divided? Just to give us a sense of what that looks like.
Sure. I had more slides about that and I cut them because I didn't want to just talk at y'all for half an hour. So, but no, if you're asking, I'm happy to provide it. Let me see if I have a slide. Yeah, okay. I'm going to share this slide because I'm a visual person, so I'm going to make y'all be visual too. Okay. So working with our team, but first, Sherry, I want to answer your question. Do I have a slide on that? Yeah. All right. We're going to start with this one. Okay. So initially, whether you have a donor or not, we need a project. I can't just go out and look for a health donor for you because, like I said, there's so many different approaches to health, geographic focuses on health. It's not going to work. So it has to start with your work, what you have designed or you're thinking about or planning. And you share that with the CFR team. We'll match you with someone who works with your unit on a regular basis, probably myself or Susanna. After that, you can do some donor research. We can do some donor research for you. I will warn you, our capacity for this is fairly limited. Most universities of our size have teams 3 or 4 times ours, and we're just really, we have not grown in that way. So we're pretty spread thin. So our capacity for research is a little bit lower, but we can get you going. You may find a donor from there, from your research. We may find something that works. We may find something 6 months down the line, to be honest. But when there is a match that we find that we think this is a valuable to pursue, we will then work on a proposal together. That proposal process is usually kind of intensive for about a month. We don't drag it out for months and months. Assuming you get the funding, we like to say it will probably come in 4 to 6 months later if you're funded. We would then have an orientation meeting. We would involve your fiscal administrator, you, anyone else on the project team, not the donor. This is an internal to VCU meeting, and we would kind of make sure you understand where the funds ended up. We confirm the budget. Everyone's kind of on the same page so that when implementation starts, you're ready to go. But from that point on, you are independent on the project. I can't see your finances. I don't check in with you day to day. We'll help with a report down the road. But at that point on, it's really the PI and the faculty lead. Finally, let's say your project was a year long. At 9 months, we should be chatting again. Is there going to be a follow-on? Do we need to ask the donor for more time? Are you ready for a next stage of funding? And the project's kind of changed at that point and evolved. And do we need to look at another round of donors? So the cycle can kind of start again. But through that whole process, think about this list at the bottom of the slide. CFR, more so than sponsored research, I'm told, helps a lot with the proposal process. We will do in-depth research on the donor if we're not familiar with them to get to know them as much as possible to give you good guidance. We do templates. We will write and edit a lot of the proposal. You're the experts. You need to provide a lot of the content, but we're happy to do really in-depth edits. We'll support documentation. If papers need to get signed, if letters of support need to be collected, we can often help with that process. And we do the actual submission. Because these have to go through a VCU foundation, it's not something the PI submits directly. We will do that. As I kind of mentioned, we get the sign off from whatever university official you need. And then on the others, at the end of the grant, hopefully, we help with stewardship and any required reports that the donor wants. So we do kind of come back into your life a year or two later to find out what happened with the work, and can convey that to the donor. Sherry, does that cover it?
Yes, I think the only other thing I'd add, just because it does happen, sometimes you get like something falls in your lap and you have a rush cycle, like, hey, it's due in 2 weeks, which I'm sure you've had to deal with. So,
Sure. We can respond pretty quickly. Like you will get a response from us within 24 hours. We're not going to leave you hanging, but the response from us, we will take the time to figure out what does this donor want? Are we set up in their system? Like how familiar are we? And how intense does the application look? Because they can vary significantly. You're going to get probably one of two responses from us. One, yes, we can do this. This looks amazing. We can give you one round of edits. We're on a short timeline. You're going to have to put this together, get us a first draft. We'll look at it. We'll submit this for you. If the timeline is even tighter and our team is really strapped with other proposal deadlines, the worst case scenario is that we say, we will submit it for you, but we cannot look at it. We do not have time for a review. So you're going to have to make sure you have all the requirements in the proposal, and we hope that it's well written, but we're not really going to be able to look at it, but we will get you through the submission process. I would say we need 3 business days, but as long as you can get it in there, and I'm not promoting that process. Please do not wait
but
that long, but it does happen. Sure.
Yeah.
It can happen. Absolutely. We will do everything we can to get it in.
I have 2 questions, kind of related. One, does this process work the same with state funding, national funding? And secondly, with our increase or desire to increase grant funding research dollars to $1 billion, are we looking to expand our list of donors, and or how do we make sure that we are doing our best as stewards of community engaged work and research to make sure that we get to that $1 billion mark?
Interesting question. Okay, can you break those apart again? Can you tell me the first one?
Yes. Does this process work the same for state funding and national funding?
Awesome. Okay, great. Glad I had this other presentation ready. Okay. So remember I told you there's two paths to bringing funding into the university. On my original slides, there was that left-hand column for sponsored research, and on the right side, CFR/philanthropy. This is another representation of those two paths. Any federal or state funding has to go through sponsored research because of the compliance, legal, and financial obligations that are usually involved in the process and in accepting the funds. The CFR office and philanthropy is simply not set up with that level of staffing to check on those things. So if you send me an opportunity and said, Franny, this looks amazing, can we go for this? I'm going to read it and say, it's federal. You got to go to sponsored research. Sorry. So it's just the way the system was set up. A lot of universities work this way. But yeah, when I see federal or state, it's going to get kicked over. When you say national, it can vary. There are other reasons, as this chart shows, that a particular proposal may fall under sponsored research versus CFR. And it's kind of the same reasons. Sometimes the compliance pieces, sometimes corporate donors want data in response. They'll give you money, but then they want you to do research for them and they want to see the results. If they're going to own any sort of publications or results, that gets into a compliance piece, that gets a little messy, sponsored research. If you're doing human subject research or IRB, it tends to hit over in sponsored programs. We can do a little bit of that on our side, but that's a kind of case by case basis. So national foundations, because of the size of the money that they're giving and sometimes the complexity of the agreement, we have to have that conversation back and forth. And that's not your responsibility. It's your responsibility to tell us that you're interested in that particular donor. We will work with sponsored research to find out the best channel to direct their proposal. And we are not doing that to cause you a headache on either side of the chart. The goal is to avoid a headache down the road. We have had donors who look philanthropic, and then they hand us an agreement for an award, and we look at it and say, holy cow, we cannot accept this. And there's delays because we didn't know that in advance. So we are trying to make things as easy for you, for the donor, and for the university to get that money in as easy as possible. Okay, Challen, we have $1 billion research goal. Tell me the question again.
Yes. So since we're trying to get to this $1 billion research goal, I want to make sure that we are being the best stewards of community engaged work as possible. But that also means that I'm sure it increases you all's load. So how can we make sure that we are working collaboratively to get to that goal, but also making sure that we are abiding by timelines and looking into work and projects that are aligned properly? So does that include looking at different foundations early, or do we look at outside of the list of foundations that you provided and be like, hey, I'm looking at this donor, this kind of aligns? How do we navigate that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So early and often is going to be my guidance to you. Contact that DAR CFR email and start a conversation with us. Regardless of whether you want to go after a national foundation or someone we've never worked with, we're working with over 150 donors every year, at least, probably over 200. So that list I showed you was not exhaustive. But if we know about your project earlier, it just starts that whole cycle rolling. We keep you in mind when we're hearing about new donors or old ones who have changed their priorities, and we can start to think because we know your project in the back of our head. And vice versa, we can give you some tools to start doing that research. And oftentimes, for example, with nursing, there's this great group called the Hillman Foundation, and they give nursing funding. And we've been talking with Lana Sargent in nursing for 3 years about a proposal to them. Is it the right time for nursing? No, 2024 was not the right time. We waited for 2025. They changed their RFP last year and they did not have the category that Lana was looking for. So we delayed. 2026 rolled around. Are we going to do it this year? So these are multi-year conversations, or we're tracking donors for multiple years. It doesn't always take that long. I don't want to scare y'all, but having that conversation early, we get on each other's radar. We get to know about your work. We learn if it's a department priority that particular year or that series of years. So I can't say that I'm being held to a target of what did you contribute to the $1 billion total, I think we are a little bit more organic in that we listen to what faculty are passionate about. And oftentimes that involves research. And so my goal is to advance your work through philanthropy And if it contributes towards that total, that's wonderful. But I'm looking for the best match that will promote your work and the work of VCU.
You want to give the opportunity for any last questions before we wrap up, either via chat or if you want to unmute.
Oh, sorry, I'm still sharing this slide. I apologize.
No worries. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for attending today. Before everyone leaves, we would love if you could complete a brief feedback survey. It helps us plan for the future and know what things and topics you all are interested in learning more about. In addition to that, in a follow-up email, but also if you have time today, invite you to our next research series session. It is Dare to Engage, Trust, and Tailored Recruitment Strategies for Inclusive IDD Research with Dr. Seb Pran. So we want to thank you again for attending today and bring a friend next time. We really enjoy engaging you all in these conversations about community engagement and community engaged research. So I'll give a moment if you want to grab that link and then also follow up via email with slides as well as the additional documents that Franny provided today. Thank you all.